upper house students, so the hallways would clear, and then fifth graders would go out. So there wasn't the engagement, because again, you don't want them in crowded hallways together and that type of thing.
So the building's going to guide a lot of that. Is it all, the building's going to guide a lot of that then. You'll have to have planning around all that, I assume. You're taking that into mind. How were teachers engaged in the process of change? Like, how early were they involved? What voice did they have during the process? Was there feedback along the way?
Well, again, I was a pretty young teacher when we made the original change. I think there was apprehension from all the teachers. The elementary teachers, some of them who knew they were coming to a middle school. Some of the junior high teachers who knew they were going to be moved to the high school. So there was a little bit of anxiety. There was input. We all had our input. But realistically, we understood that it really wasn't our decision alone to make. I think that the easy decision for any of us when we're involved in, no matter what job we have, is I'm comfortable where I am. I don't want to change. But one of the things we did is we made sure that there's some staff development, there's some talk about middle school philosophy, what the expectations are. What's the expectations in a new building if you're bringing in new staff members? Let's say, I don't know how many it would be, but some staff members might come up to a middle school, and you would have discussion, well, how's the culture of that school? What's the expectation? It's like anything else, it's a change. One of the things I find very interesting is for our teachers that made that transition, none of them transferred out to go back. And it was a relatively young, I don't want to say young staff, it seemed young at the time to me, but they had a good 15. And they had 15 years left, a lot of them to teach. And no one left. And to this day, in the middle school that we have, anyone we've hired, or we've had elementary teachers, I've had to deny requests for transfers in. And that's the truth. Because people want to get in a building. So it really was something that you have to deal with. You have to look at how are we going to plan for the structure, the internal structure of a building? How are we going to handle staff movement? Is it going to be voluntary for some? Is it going to be not voluntary for others? It's nice if everybody volunteers to switch, but everyone doesn't do that. So how that's handled is obviously very, very important. And we actually created it. We had an elementary, when they first started the school, the lower house principal was an elementary principal who moved up, and the 7th and 8th grade principal was a former junior high principal. Now it doesn't matter anymore, but that's how they structured it, because it was fear of, I don't want to work for a secondary principal, or I don't want to, be in a different environment, but that's all gone away.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Hello. My question is, you mentioned that the business, computer, and information technology class and the PE and health class and art and music and tech ed all comprise a unified arts program. Are all of these courses or subjects required for every student in each grade level?
That's a good question. No, they're not required. If and I'm not an expert on Chapter 4, but we don't give everyone everything. You can't. It's hard to give in a schedule. Right now, though, we do give them art and music in every grade. They do have health and PE. We're working on the tech ed curriculum because it's really a staffing issue. If we could hire more staff, we could do it. We can't. We just don't have the funds to do that. So we have a little bit of trade-offs on some of those. But for the most part, students get the art, the music, the PE, computers. I believe they get a 3 out of 4 years, some exposure to that. We've done some tweaking because, like a lot of districts, we've had to cut staff over a 5-year period of time. We stabilized, but with that cutting, we had to deliver the unified arts a little bit differently. Mm-hmm.
I did it right the first time. I always do that. First, I want to thank you very much for coming out and addressing us this evening. It's really been very helpful to hear from you in a district that's had this model for quite some time. But it does raise more questions to me because certainly you have many things in place, and we would be creating a structure, basically. So I guess my first question is, I was wondering what just as someone who's experienced this, what you thought a reasonable timeline was to train your staff, because they're coming up from maybe not being departmentalized, the teachers, to that concept, so that they can embrace that, be preparing the students, preparing the community. Just what's a reasonable window in your mind for making that switch?
I did expect that question.
Okay.
And we did not prep that either, because I don't think that's fair. You know what? Every district's different. I would say anywhere 12 months or less, it can be done. I wouldn't say in 2 months. I wouldn't say don't do this for September of 14. I would say it would be reasonable that it could be done by September of 15. But again, with any change, and your administrative team knows this, and I'm sure teaching staff and administrators know that at the building levels, that you have to have a plan.
Yes.
And the nice thing is now, when we were doing the middle school, created that in 1982, even though middle schools existed at the time, they weren't all over the place. Today, the nice thing is there's schools, and your district's doing a great job, I believe, in this committee, to take a look at what's out there. So you don't have to start from the ground up. We look at other middle schools all the time ourselves. I look at it of what I would say is look at what exemplary middle schools do. And there's a lot, I mean, I think we're one, there's a lot of other ones in the area. Even if it's not a 5-8, you can still find some of the trends and characteristics that they have that work. But I think that you have to be aware that change can happen, but if it's well planned, it can go very, very smoothly.
Pushing. And just a follow-up question. You talked about the teacher team approach in the 5th grade, and how you have roughly between 285 and 300 and some kids per grade. So I was just wondering how many teams you have in each of those grades, and roughly what the caseload of the teachers are.
Good question. We have the only grade that doesn't have all 3-member teams is 5th graders, 1 2-member team, because of enrollment issues and teacher issues. So the other grades all have 12, and that's a staffing concern. We can always flip-flop if we need to. We just avoid doing that. But the average team would have anywhere from 75 students to, no one has 90. That would be
Okay.
30 piece, so they don't have 90, but I would say they probably average about 75 to 78 students. Of course, our enrollment has increased. So their workload would be 75 students. But again, one of the things that we talk about with that is by saying that the math teacher's only teaching math, the preparation's a little bit different. And the other piece is, you mentioned departments. One of the things that in a middle school, initially for many, many years, it was looked upon as teams and only your teaching team. And that was a mistake that the middle school teams made years ago. We now are a team of 3, a 5th grade team, but also departments on that grade level. So by having a team time and prep time as we do, we have designated now times where 2 times a week they meet as departments. That has been very, very helpful. So again, experience, when you talk about creating it, the teaming concept is wonderful, but what we found out, we were isolating people by just teams, not kids, teachers.
But teachers.
So you have to look at it from student perspective, but also a teacher perspective. And now I think we found the best of both worlds, and it's, it took us a lot of time to figure it out, really.
And then my third question is, I know you're not going to get into the character ed program in depth, but it sounds like that is a big component in terms of creating the right climate for, especially if you're going to be combining this larger age span in a building. And I guess I'm wondering if you saw, because you didn't have it the whole time you were a 5th through 8th grade community, but if you saw, what was the impact once you brought that program in, and what you saw in terms of discipline referrals or just the general school climate?
Well, I want to go back to the gentleman's question earlier about discipline. One of the things that we did when we initially started the middle school back in the early 80s is we had an advisor program that really didn't work well. And we didn't have any specific, they talked about more values at that point. That was the terminology that was being used. So what we found was that we were having more discipline problems with all our students because we really didn't have anything in place that was telling our students proactively how we wanted them to act towards each other, with their families, with staff. So to me, your academics are critical, but as equally as important is the type of students that you develop. And that's developed through a character ed program. Now, they're not, I'm going to say right now, they're not easy to do. It is really something you have to see what tailors your needs in your school or school district. But we have felt that what's turned our school into a great school, and I mean that sincerely, a great school. We were a very good school. What made us into a great school has been the infusion of character ed as an important part. We don't have separate character ed lessons. It's infused in the curriculum. Most language arts, social studies, in lessons, that takes time to develop, years to develop in. But when you do that, it's not taking a 30-minute block of time once a week to teach character ed. To be all honestly, that doesn't work. I hope you don't do it, but if you do, my experience has been it will not work well. If you infuse it and it's part of your everyday language, culture, and the operation of your school and classrooms, so when you discipline students, you refer back to character traits, whether it's respect, whether it's family, whether it's trust, whatever it may be. So yeah, it's a big part. And I think that's an overall picture of what a middle school and any school can do. Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
There we go. Thank you again for coming this evening. It seems as if your district is very devoted to the middle school concept and the key components that are essential to running a strong middle school. And one of the things that are mentioned in your presentation, as well as you just referred to, is this scheduling component with having these flexible blocks of time, as well as these teams, whether it be a two-person team, three-person team, or for your upper houses, a four-person team. But the other thing I heard you mention was it being essential, having the common prep times, a team time, which has evolved into a team time, a grade level time, and a department time, even though you're under a lot of the constraints that you said as far as budgeting and staffing is concerned. So is that something that you have been focused on and made a conscious decision to hang on to, even though it might be easier to schedule in a different way or to possibly cut staff if you scheduled in a different way?
Will this tape be shown in Upper Marion? When I speak about we, it's my staff. It was the middle school, we, and it's the community. When the budget crisis hit us, like it did everywhere else about 5 or 6 years ago, I was almost directed to rework a schedule and do away with team time.
As occurred here.
Now, as someone who has done a lot with that school, and I spent my career in that school district, it was a hill to die on for me. So I had a heart-to-heart talk with the superintendent and said, we're not going to do this. Because if we do this, you're going to dismantle a blue ribbon school, what I speak at. Now, we had that built from the beginning, so I didn't put that in. How a district handles that, or a school handles that, is finding common time. Elementary schools, for instance, in our district, have common prep time by grade level. The only other time they have is either in the morning before class, about 20 minutes, or in the afternoon after class, or after school ends for students. You have to make a decision. Do I feel personally that it's important? Yes, I do. How much team time is necessary is questionable. Could you do it with less than 5 days a week? We probably could. Would it be as effective as I might like or the teachers might like? Maybe not. But it was, a lot of it's from budget constraints and what you want. But I think you have to decide what you want first as a district and then go from there. And then there's always parameters. I wanted more, I lost staff. I'll be very honest, I lost staff. And I didn't want to lose staff, and people were in tears, my teachers. I said, well, what, there's nothing I can do. We've got to make it work with staff reduction. And I had 6 health and PE teachers at one time. I went down to 3. Can you deliver the same program? No, you can't. So you do it differently. But you don't go away from your core. You have to have what your philosophy is and what you want to do and then go from there. I think all districts do that. You're welcome. It's a good thing I told my wife I wouldn't be home early. I'm just kidding.
Not with this crowd.
She's probably glad I'm here.
I have a couple of questions. Do the specialists, the art, music, health, PE, tech ed teachers, do those teachers have a prep time? I know you just mentioned the grade level common planning time, but do the specialist teachers have prep time?
Yes, they do. One of the things I changed dealing with equity is when we changed our schedule 5 years ago to even make it better, I think, than it was before, is that our teachers, academic teachers, teach the minutes equivalent to what used to be called 6 periods a day, which was technically not allowed to be done in a contract, only by like 10 people. But they agreed that that's what they wanted to do. So I said, we have to create equity within the school. The Unified Arts teachers teach 5 classes a day. There's a rotation basis for some of our special needs students who need specialized class instruction. So they might go to art today, they might go to music tomorrow, they might go to PE the next day. So that teacher would be teaching 6 that day. All my special teachers have lunch duty. And that was a trade-off. And it was hard in the beginning because some always had it and some never had it. But I said, for equity reasons, you teach 5 and you do a duty. I didn't want my academic teachers doing duties. I'd rather have them teach. So that's kind of how we did it. So when you look at teaching minutes or contact minutes with students, it's the same as far as how many minutes students are in front of every staff member in our building. And they do have a team in prep time also.
And another question, do you have lead teachers dedicated to the middle school? Like, how do you have curriculum led throughout your district?
We do not have lead teachers. We used to have team leaders. We don't have team leaders anymore. That was a budgetary cut. We don't have anyone dealing with curriculum directly. We have a curriculum director. And when I was principal, I was basically overseeing all the curriculum. So no, we don't have that, and that is difficult for us, to be very honest. But we made it work. That's why we actually went to the designating a team time to more department time, because we needed more department meetings without administrators to occur on their own, and couldn't just do it once a month. Some departments were already doing it, but we needed to make it consistent. So that's something that's difficult for us, but it's working. It could be better, but again, going back to you work with whatever you can based on staffing and budget constraints.
Thank you. And I
welcome.
just have one last question. We have the art and the music, the health and PE in the elementary schools. The only thing that seems a little bit different is maybe the tech ed. Can you explain a little bit more about that program that you have?
Okay, we moved from what was a very, very traditional industrial arts model about 15 years ago to start to switch it over to a little bit of more computerized work. But about 5 years ago, we made a major commitment that we were going to go to the STEM route. And we hired a person, as I mentioned earlier, and we retrained one of our other tech ed teachers. And now it is highly technical. They're working on computers every day in one lab. And the other lab is what we would call a production lab, where materials are built, put together for projects that they're working on. So it's highly technical, from robotics in the classroom to graphics. It's amazing as you know, the technology today, kids are growing up with that. So for them to use the technology in these rooms now, they want it. So what they produce is pretty awesome.
That sounds really exciting. Do the fifth graders get that
Oh,
every
yes.
day also?
Definitely, they get it every day.
That's great.
Well, not every day, every year.
Oh,
And they cycle through once every 4 days. They have that class.
okay.
So again, it's pretty neat, and again, it's hands-on, and our teacher who does it is even after school. They have after-school groups, clubs, that these kids come back, and then we have some parents that come in and help run the clubs even beyond what we do. So it's been a great exposure to something new that some schools can do, some can't. We've been fortunate that we made a commitment to a teacher and some money. The next part is carrying it in a high school, which is still on hold because we don't have the money right now to put a full lab in place.
Is there transportation for the kids after they do the after-school activities?
We used to have activity buses that ran at 4:30 and 5:30, 5 days a week. We cut that back because of budget. So we decided, the high school principal and myself, that we could do 4:30 buses Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays.
Okay.
So we run our activities for a lot of the intramurals and other activities for fifth and sixth graders will run till 4:30, 3 days a week. The 5:30 buses are more for the sports.
Okay.
Even though if they're running a drama practice or you have a club that runs till 5:30, they have access to the 5:30 bus.
That's great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'm going to just ask, I see you and one other one. Well, I feel an obligation to send our guest home sometime in this time zone, but I just want to indicate that John has agreed, and as I mentioned in the beginning, we're going to have a number of these sessions throughout the spring and summer and hopefully the fall with his school and some other schools as we begin to identify them. And John's also talked about having the opportunity to have one session where he would bring some teachers and some parents from his school, and they'll also visit here. And for those who are on the committee, he's agreed to have a field trip, if you will. So I'm going to ask that you two are the last, so that I feel some obligation to get this guy. He's got an hour's drive.
Okay, I feel privileged with that now. But could you address, because you said there's a lot of segregation with the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, how do they address special ed students? Because I'm sure as they come up, the numbers may be smaller as they're cross between grade levels. And also not only just special ed, but we find at the elementary school, a lot of students need interventions. They don't quite qualify as special ed students, but they need some of the intervention services to keep their grades up.
That's an excellent question. And that goes back to a question that was earlier from the fellow who asked about the physical plan. Mm-hmm. You know, you can't usually design any school exactly the way you want unless funds are unlimited and your space is unlimited. So one of the things that we do struggle with at times is location of where we have special ed classes. You don't want to segregate special ed classes.
Right, exactly.
So we make sure that we have some of the special ed classes within the grade level 4 of where the 5th graders are, the 6th graders are, 7 or 8. But the way our building's set up, we have rooms in an area. It's a second floor. We have 3 floors. So on the second floor, we have a lot of our supports, reading support, math support. When they're not pushing in, that's where they would be pulled. There's some more special ed classrooms there. There's some of the other unified arts classes might be there. Our foreign language is there. What would happen is every once in a while, some of those students may move from house to house or floor to floor. But again, it's in a structured way. So when you're on the second floor of our building, in most of the areas, there might be multiple grades there of students, but not full classes. So again, let's say an 8th grade group might be going to a math specialist. Correct. Some 5th graders may be going to a reading specialist at that time. They're just there. And so, I'm sorry, go ahead.
But you still have the special ed services for all the different grade levels.
Yes, we have specific special ed teachers assigned to grade levels. Some cross over,
Okay.
but not everyone. You know, some of the learning support don't cross over. It's more some of the other supports, more specialized services that may cross over. but
Okay.
not much at all. We're blessed with having a lot of rooms right now available for us.
And the other piece was one of my cohorts wanted me to ask, do the students have like a homeroom? Or they just kind of travel with their, that's a elementary philosophy that they kind of start with that homeroom.
We eliminated homeroom.
Okay.
Homeroom, no, that's a great question. No, not budget cuts. That's more or less a John cut. Because one of the things that we looked at, the building I'm going to be very upfront. I don't kid about anything here. Homeroom was in a schedule when the middle school was created and stayed in until about 3 years ago.
Okay.
It was a contractional issue of the teachers had X amount of teaching periods plus a homeroom. The homeroom was 43 minutes. Okay, because they used to do different things in homeroom. No, they really did. Originally it was structured the right way, but it didn't work. When we made a schedule change 4 or 5 years ago, we couldn't give up the homeroom philosophy. I said, okay, and I knew I knew what was going to happen. I said, okay, look, we're going to put it in the third block. That's why you see the time difference. Let's put the last 15 minutes of block 3 as a homeroom period if that's what you want to use it for. I'm not putting it in the schedule. I'm not going to have it anywhere where it's seen. It's just that you know that if you need to do something as a team, as a class, or whatever it is, quote homeroom, because there's still a home base with a teacher on a team,
Right.
but it's not a formal homeroom. What we did, to be very honest, is we took that homeroom time, we took 25 minutes of it initially to add the instructional time. Within a year, and I predicted this, I told the staff, you'll want to teach. So what do they do now? They teach. You know why? They need the time. So it went away. They still have the kids the same amount of time they always did from 1982 on. Only the difference is every time they're back on team, it's instructional minutes.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you
There's no
very
need-
much.
There's no need for homeroom.
Right.
We take attendance electronically and deal with all that now.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you
Hello.
for coming.
Sure.
I actually have a follow-up special education question. I was wondering whether you assign a special ed teacher to a particular house, or is it more grade level? I'm looking as far as the idea of co-teaching. Is that part of your team philosophy?
It is. We do some co-teaching. It's not where we want it to be, but that's because, again, some staffing concerns that we might have, so we can't service the way we want. We do some co-teaching, some pull-out. No, it's based on some of the certifications, too, as you know. Depends on what they have to do, and the gentleman did the certification pieces tonight, based on who's qualified to do certain things, especially in 7th and 8th grade. So we have some people assigned, if they have specific math instruction they're doing, in 7th or 8th grade, they're going to have a math cert of some type or whatever they need to teach special education students. But we try to assign them by grade and house as best. The only people who really cross over might be an itinerant teacher, or it could be, we have a behavior specialist now that we put in. We took something away and put that back in our program. So he would see students 5, 8 based on need. But pretty much some teachers are 5th grade, 6th grade, 7 or 8 with minimal crossover. In-house, they might cross over, but usually not from house to house. That's a good question.
And also, just one more. You explained to us what the 5th and 6th grade block of scheduling time would look like. I'm assuming that with the 7th and 8th grade, just that third block, would then that be divided equally among science and
No,
social
that's a
studies?
good, I didn't want to go into it, but I can. It's real quickly. No, it's easy. It really is. We have 4-member teams, but we have 3 blocks a day, just like the 5th grade schedule.
Right.
So we rotate. Every day, something's dropped. So student might have math, science, social studies today, but not language arts. So we do a rotation of a schedule, and every day, students only have 3 classes, not 4. In the long run, the way we do it, in the amount of the year, we've increased instructional minutes in all the subjects. It's, you think, oh, you're cutting it back? It's been increased because we increased the instructional time, per day and per week and per marking period. And So it works well with that rotation, because you have to, because of certifications. So every once in a while, you have people dual certified, but we don't use them in that capacity in upper house. It's a good question. Thank you.
John, thanks again for the board. The board knows that when we first started to look at this and I started to call around to